Hello everyone and welcome back to this Tech Time. I thank you for joining me in this video. In this video we're going to set up a Proxmox SDN. But first, what is Proxmox SDN? Proxmox SDN is software-defined networking. It's a feature in Proxmox that enables the creation of a virtual zone in networks, and this is a feature that comes by default in Proxmox version 8 and newer. So if you have an older version of Proxmox, you'd have to install it. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to basically create a network inside of my network. And on this hidden virtual network, I'm going to put my home lab set up inside of it. And I'm going to be setting all this up inside of this practice Proxmox node that I have set up that doesn't have very much on it at the moment. First thing that I'm going to do, and that I suggest that you're going to do as well, is just make sure that this is already installed on your Proxmox server. So I'm just going to copy that command. I'm going to go over to my node. I'm going to go to shell, and I'm already logged in as root. So now I'm going to paste that apt install command, enter, and it says that it's already installed and it's already at the newest version. And then once you've confirmed that you have this apt installed, then you need to navigate to this file here and make sure this line is present at the end. So I'm simply going to copy that file path. I'm going to go back to my server, and then I'm going to type in cat and paste that file path, click enter, and if I look down here at the bottom, I see that line at the bottom that says source interfaces D on it. And this line being present means that the SDN configuration gets included and activated. And once you've confirmed that it's there, we'll go back over to the how-to article, and it says we need to make sure we have DNS mask. So I'm simply going to copy the line again, paste it here, and it's not already on my server, so I'm going to hit enter to confirm that I want to install it. And then I'm going to run an apt update just to renew my packages. And then we're going to run systemctl disable. And by having this disabled, we make sure that we have no conflicts between the SDN we're about to create and our network that we're connected to. And now that we have all that installed, we're at a point that we can set up Proxmox SDN. So I'm going to click on data center, and then I'm going to go down and I'll see an option for SDN, and I'll click on there. And what you see on this page is all going to depend on if you have a cluster set up and how many nodes you have available. I just have one node available, so I just have one local network. But if you have multiple nodes in a cluster, you would see one for each node. And what we're going to be doing is, right now there's a local network. We're going to create our own network. And to do that, we first need to go to zones. We're going to click on add, and you'll see a couple of different options under add. You'll see simple, VLAN, QNQ, VXLAN, EVPN. For this video, I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm going to use a simple setup. And first, we're going to set up ID, and I'm going to call this VirtLab for virtual lab. Then it's going to ask for MTU. You should be fine leaving it on auto, but you can change it if you need to. I'm going to leave mine on auto. By default, it's going to go to all nodes, which if you're in a cluster with multiple nodes, you can select which nodes you want this applied to and which you don't, in case you don't want it applied to some of your nodes. But in my situation where I just have the one, being all of nodes is fine. And then you want to make sure you select auto DHCP here at the bottom. If you do not see the auto DHCP option, that means that advanced has not been selected. So just select advanced in the checkbox and you should see it. And everything else I'm going to leave as default. And so I'm going to click add. There you'll see my zone show up. Its ID is VirtLab. It's a type simple, and it's in the PVE, which is okay, and the state is new. So now we need to go down to VNet, and we're going to click create new virtual network, and this is where we're going to create the actual network itself. And I'm going to call this VLab01. I can give it an alias. I'm going to say Virtual Lab 01. And then you can select a zone, which we only have the Virtual Lab zone to choose from right now, so we'll select it. And I'm not going to go and set up VLANs in this video, so I'm simply going to click Create. And you'll see in your new VNet here, you'll see the ID, VLab01, the alias, Virtual Lab 01, and you'll see the zone, Virtual Lab. And the state is new. And now that we have a VNet created, we have the option to create a subnet. So I'll click on my VNet, and I'll come over here and click Create on Subnet. And so to keep this completely separate from my home network, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 10.10.10.0. I'm going to give this a /24, which means that fourth number can be anything between 2 and 255. And the gateway is going to be the same, but it's going to take the .1 IP address. And you need to select SNAT if you want the source network address translation. This allows multiple devices on a local network to share a single public IP address when accessing external networks, for example, the internet. Other Otherwise, this internal network will not have access to the outside network itself. So you couldn't ping Google, for example. I'm going to leave the DNS zone prefix empty. Then next I'm going to go to DHCP ranges. And here I can actually specify the DHCP range. So you can click add, and like I mentioned previously, I can't use .1 because it's already being used. And I can't use 255 because it's being used as my broadcast network. So since I can't use those two addresses, I'm going to say that I want my DHCP range to be between 10.100 and 10.200, which for me is going to be more than enough IP addresses. And then I'll click create. Now we'll see our subnet and our gateway, and we'll see the status is new. So now we have the new subnet, the new VNet, and the new zone. Now in order to accept all these changes that we just made, we'll need to click back to SDN, and then here you simply click apply. And it's going to ask if you're sure. We're going to say yes. So while that is running, if you'll bring up your syslog here, you'll see it refreshing the network in the background. And then once it's finished, you'll see the status of it as available here. And if you look up under your node in the menu, you should see your virtual lab show up as available as well over here. And so now we have officially created a Proxmox SDN virtual network. And so now we can actually add virtual items to this network. So we'll go up here to our node, and I'm going to click create VM, and I'm going to leave the VM ID as default, and I'm going to name this simply demo SDN, and I'm going to name it 10 because I don't want to have a 01 for it, and I'm going to give my container a password. I'm going to leave all the default. Click next. My template is going to be Ubuntu 24. I'm going to click next. The default for disk is fine. The CPU default is fine. The memory default is fine. Again, this is just an example for being on the SDN network. But now that we're under network, if you go to bridge, you're going to have two options. You're going to have the VMBRO, which is my actual network connection to the server itself. And then you'll see the VLAB that we just created. So I can choose to put it on this separate network, or I can choose to put it on the regular network. And so I'm going to choose my virtual lab. I'm going to set the IP address to DHCP. I'm going to leave the rest to default. And then again, the default for DNS. And then I'm going to come to confirm. And as I've stated in previous videos, I'm going to leave the start after created unchecked because I don't like that option. And I'm going to click finish. So now it shows that the container's been created. So I'm going to close this box. And I can see it over here in the menu, demo SDN10. So first I'm going to click on my data center. And then I'm going to scroll down here to IPAM. And here inside of IPAM, I can see that my VMID 107, which is my demo SDN10 container, will receive IP address 10100. And what IPAM will do is it's going to give you a layout of your virtual network, and it will show you what IP addresses the different containers and virtual machines will get. So you see our virtual lab, and inside virtual lab, you have VLab 01. And inside VLab 01, you have a subnet 10.0/24. And inside 10.0.24/24, you have a gateway of 10.1, and you have a VMID machine with 107 that's getting an IP address of 10.100, and you can even see the MAC address for the container that we've created. So now I'm going to come over here and click on my demo SDN10. I'm going to click on console, and then I'm going to right click on the container, and I'm going to click start. And the whole reason I did a container first is because it starts up a lot faster. So now I'm simply going to type in root, since that's the default user, and the password I created. And now I'm logged in. And so now that I'm logged in, I'm going to test network connectivity by pinging Google. And that was successful. So I'm going to try to ping google.com. And of course that was successful too. I just wanted you to see the difference. So this proves that the connection between my local network and my virtual network is working. And since I know I have a good internet connection, one thing I always do first on any virtual instance is run apt update. And in apt upgrade, and I'll pass it the -y for yes and hit enter. And while that's running, if I was to open up a terminal on my host machine here and tried to ping 10.100, the ping request is going to fail. And that's because this is on an internal SDN network. And now that that's finished, if I try to do the opposite and ping from this SDN network outside to my personal computer here, ping-c-3, that's successful. So I can go out from this network, but I can't come into this network. So this network is its own private network. But if I go to the server that's hosting Proxmox and ping the container, it can successfully reset. And that's because the virtual network is on this host server. Now you can make this even more secure if you wanted to. So one thing you need to know about firewalls and Proxmox is that they work from the top level down. So you have a firewall at the data center, you have a firewall at the node, and then you have a firewall on the virtual instance itself. So to configure a firewall on this virtual network, what we first need to do is we need to go up to the data center, and we're going to go down to firewall. And once we get the firewall, we'll see that there's no rules currently enabled on the firewall for the data center. So if we were to cut this on while there's no rules in the firewall, we would lose connection to the Proxmox server, because by default, since there's no rules, it's going to deny everything. So the very first rule we're going to add is access to the web GUI itself. So it's going to be in accept and then interface, which should be VMBR, I believe 0 for this machine. Let me pause the video and check. Yes, it was VMBR 0. And the protocol is going to be TCP, and the destination is going to be 8006 for the web interface. Now we'll click enabled and we'll click add, and you'll see your new firewall rule there allowing access to the web interface. So once this rule has been added and it's on, and you can tell it's on by the checkbox, we're going to go to options and we'll double click this line that says firewall no, and it's going to bring up an option to edit the firewall. We're going to select this checkbox for firewall, which enables it. We'll click OK, and it will take it about 5 to 10 seconds to start processing traffic. And so now I'm going to hold down the shift key and I'm going to click refresh, which is going to reload the page, and I still see the firewall, so that means that I'm successfully still going through the firewall through the web interface. So I did not log myself out of the web interface. So now we need to add a rule for HTTP and DHCP request, because all the virtual items inside our virtual network is going to be sending out DHCP request. So we need to enable that in the data center firewall first, and we'll also add DNS to our rule as well, because again our virtual network is going to be requesting DNS. And right now, our firewall, our data center firewall, is only accepting traffic through the web GUI. So we need to add a rule for DHCP and DNS. So we'll click add. So we're going to do traffic in will be accepted if the macro is DHCP forward. And just to keep things simple for everybody, I'm going to put in the comments DHCP request. And we'll click add. Then for the next rule, we're going to do traffic in will be accepted. Go ahead and click enabled if the macro matches DNS. And again, I'm going to say DNS request and click add. So now we have a rule for DNS and DHCP and for the web interface itself. And all this is on the data center firewall. Our firewall rules goes from the top down on how they are processed. So I'm going to put the web interface one at the top because it's the most important in my opinion. Then I'm going to put the DHCP forward in the middle, and then I'm going to put the DNS as the third one. And these are my 3 most important firewall rules. And even though I just have a single Proxmox server, these 3 rules would be applicable even in a cluster environment, because these are the 3 rules that you'll need to have and able to have a software-defined network internally and have the firewall enabled. And before I leave this page, just to keep everything the same, I'm going to click on my graphical user interface rule. I'm going to click edit, and I'm going to put in the comments that this is for the web GUI and click OK. So right now the data center firewall is on, see it's on, and we have rules set up to allow traffic. And this is all from into the data center itself. But if we go to the node and we go to firewall, we'll see there are no rules, but by default the firewall has been enabled because the data center has been enabled. And so even though I only have the one node, if you were in a cluster type environment, because of these rules at the data center, and by default the firewall rules being enabled on the nodes themselves, because there's no rules on each individual node, they would not be allowing traffic between the nodes. So if you were in a cluster environment, you would need to add rules for your different nodes to talk together inside the cluster. And even though I don't have different nodes, I can still add these rules so that you can see what you would need to do if you were in a cluster type environment. In your environment, them not being able to communicate together may be fine. You may actually like that in your environment. But let's say, for example, you have self-storage set up. If you had self-storage set up, then the storage would not be able to communicate between the nodes in your cluster. So what you would need to do is you need to go back to the data center, and if you look under firewall, you'll see an alias option. We're going to click on there. We're going to click the add the alias, and for this alias we're going to call it the local network. And the IP insider notation form will be 192.168.10.0/24 for my network. For your network, it may be different. This is for my whole home network. Now you can be even more specific and only specify the nodes in your cluster if you wanted to, but to keep things simple for this video, I'm just going to do this, and then I'm going to click add. And now I'm going to create a new one for the gateway. And this is going to be the gateway for my real network. Then I'm going to click add. And I'm also going to suggest you create an alias to cover your virtual network as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click up here at IPM, and I'm going to look at my network range for my virtual network, which is 10.10.10.0/24. So then I'm going to go back down here to aliases. I'm going to click on add, and this is my virtual lab, so I'm going to say virtual/lab, and then the CIDR notation for this network is going to be 10.10.10.0/24. I'll click add, and that should be enough. So again, I have my gateway for my actual network, I have my actual home network's range, and then I have my virtual lab IP address range. So now that we have aliases, we need to create security groups. So we'll go up here to security groups, and I'll click on create. First network I'm going to create is for my local network, local-network, and then I'm going to click create, and you'll see it there. And inside my local network, I'm going to create a rule. I'm going to say incoming traffic will be accepted while the source is local net, and I'm going to click to enable it and click add, and then I'm going to click add again. And I'm going to say outgoing traffic is accepted if the destination is local network. I'm going to click enabled and click OK. So this allows traffic into local devices from local devices. So your different nodes will be able to communicate to each other. And the whole reason why we created aliases is so that instead of having to enter in the same IP address multiple times, we just have a drop down box and we can select the alias. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to inside my node. Then I'm going to go to the firewall rules, and I'll click insert security group. And from the drop down, you're going to see the local network that we just created security group. We're going to click enable and click add. And if I had other nodes, I would go to each individual nodes and do the same thing. But I only have the one node in my situation. Again, I did this so that if you had multiple nodes in a cluster, you would know what to do. Now, right now, it's pretty open in the type of traffic that can go between each nodes inside of this data center. If you wanted to micromanage it some more, you would have to play with the rules yourself and figure out what works for your situation. So now we need to set up a rule for our individual virtual items inside the nodes themselves. So we're going to go back to data center and go back to security group. We're going to click create, and this security group will be for the virtual network. And I'm going to click create. So now we're going to select the security group we just created, which is virtual network. We're going to click on add. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that any virtual machine or container that is running inside the virtual network has no access to the destination local network. I'm going to go ahead and click enable. So what this is going to do is all virtual machines or containers cannot access my local network. The connection will simply be dropped. So I'm going to click add. So now the one problem is with this rule, none of our containers or virtual machines, if they have this rule enabled, will be able to access the internet. Because right now this rule would block the gateway. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another rule, and we're going to say any traffic going out will be accepted if the destination is the gateway. We're going to click to enable it, and then we'll click add. So now if any traffic that's running to the internet goes through, it will be accepted. If it tries to connect to anything on the local network, it will be dropped. And that's the order in which firewall rules run. They go from the top down. And another rule I'm going to add, which is honestly kind of optional for you. And so I'm going to accept any traffic in if the source is local network. That means any traffic into my virtual network from the local network will be accepted. I'm going to click add. We're going to look at the order again because order is important. So we're going to accept traffic in if it's from the local network. We're going to accept traffic out if it's to the gateway, but we're going to drop any outgoing traffic if it's to the local network. So any of our virtual machines or containers will be able to access the internet because they'll go out through the gateway that we set up as an alias earlier. But none of our virtual machines or containers can reach our internal network. But our internal network can reach our virtual machines and containers. If I go back to my demo SDN 10 and I try to access another virtual machine on my network, I can successfully get to it. So right now I don't want that to happen. So let me exit that. Now that I'm back on my demo container, I'm going to go down to firewall. I'm going to go to options. I'm going to double click the firewall no. And I'm going to check the checkbox to enable it and click OK. And I'm going to give that a couple of seconds to sync up. While that's syncing, we'll go to firewall. We're going to click insert security group. And then under security group, we're going to select the alias that we called virtual network. We're going to click enable, and then we're going to click add. So now with the firewall enabled and that security group there, if we go back to our console and I'm just going to up arrow to the last SSH command I made. I'm going to click enter. I'm going to get no response. It's going to prevent me from reaching that resource because it's not part of this virtual network itself. And I'm not getting any response whatsoever because the connection is being dropped. So I'm going to hit Control C to cancel that. To prove that I still have internet access, I'm going to do a ping of Google, and that's successful. And I'll ping google.com too to prove that DNS is working. Okay, so DNS is still not doing just right for me. So we need to go back to data center. We're going to go back to firewall and then to security group, virtual network. And we're going to add another rule. So any traffic going out will be accepted as long as it's going to source port 53 for destination. And we're going to say local network. And this needs to be for micro DNS. DNS for the local network will be accepted. And I forgot to enable it. So now if I go back to my container, I'm going to up arrow to ping google.com, and now I get a response. And I can still ping quad 8. And now if I try to ping a machine on my local network, I get no response. That's how I want it. So if you've made it to the end of the video, I thank you so much for joining me. I know that was kind of more advanced than I normally do videos, so thank you for hanging on. Please hit the like button down below. It really helps out my channel. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you'll be notified when that video comes out.